She has been here in Columbus for the last 35 years, originally from Cincinnati. She has her background in education, but also spent some time working with her dad with his car dealership. She is going to talk, as you know, about the Indiana death penalty, and so that's our topic tonight. She has been a board member of the Indiana Abolition Coalition for the past about 3 years. She's been married to Mike Keogh, if you know him, for about 34 years, and has 3 kids who all graduated from North. They're now out of the house. That's what I have for you. So this is Donna. We have a couple new people. If you don't mind, this is your first time. If you would just stand up and introduce yourself so everybody knows who you are. I think we have 2. Oh, we have 3. Oh, you're all going to stand up at the same time. Oh. All right, so whoever wants to go.
I'll go. Okay, so my name is Michaela, and I am new to Indiana. I just moved to the Greenwood area in June, and I work for Cummins as an HR generalist, not an engineer.
My name is Scotty Biggs. I'm new to Indiana and Columbus and all of this. I'm the new youth minister at St. Bart's.
Hi, I'm Laura. I came here with Kyle because we went to high school together, and I live in Green.
Awesome. All right, thanks. All right, so without further ado, Don's going to lead us in prayer, and then we're going to get started.
Okay. Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen. God, please tonight open our hearts, open our minds to hear your word, and help us to understand what it is you would like us to do to live the gospel. We ask this through our Lord Jesus Christ.
If you can't see, go ahead and feel free to move right now. That would be a good time.
Well, as Allie said, my name is Donna, and I kind of backed into this role with the Indiana Abolition Coalition.
I've backed up far enough.
I don't know if any of you knew a lady by the name of Pat Kennard. She died in July, but she was a very, very active member of St. Bartholomew Parish, kind of the poster child for causes, for activist causes. She gave my name to someone, a local person who was involved with the IAC and knew that I was writing to an inmate at the penitentiary, and so she thought perhaps I'd be interested in joining the club, the group. And so I said yes, and so here I am. The interesting story that I wouldn't tell Allie, I told her I'd do it, is how many of you go to St. Bartholomew? Okay. But St. Bartholomew has a thing at Christmas called the Giving Tree. It's always up in the armpits. And the tree is hung with paper ornaments, and on the ornaments are names of children and their ages, and they are the children of death row inmates. And you are asked to buy gifts for the children and send a card to the inmate so that he can then thank you or whatever. Just tell him, okay, I've sent some gifts to your kids. Here's what I sent them, so you can talk to them about it. Well, my younger son and I did that about 8 or 9 years ago. We picked up an ornament, sent the gifts, and so I sent a Christmas card to this fellow on the federal death row in Terre Haute, and he wrote back to thank me. And I wrote back to him, and we've been writing ever since. He really likes to write letters, and they're very long and involved. So, you need to ask? Go ahead. So anyway, it's been very enlightening. I should say that before I could pick one of those ornaments off the tree, I came to an understanding that execution is completely wrong. That the death penalty is just completely wrong. It's immoral. And I had to get to that place before I could write to a fellow who was in the federal penitentiary. St. Bartholomew, but downstairs, where the elevator comes down, you probably don't think the elevator, some of us old folks do from time to time. There is a little rolling cart, and in that rolling cart are a bunch of pamphlets, and one of them happens to be this one. It's called Life Matters, a Catholic Response to the Death Penalty. And in that are a couple of interesting things I wanted to point out. First of all, first and foremost, the Catechism of the Catholic Church, number 2267, in the Catechism states, quote, let's see, our teaching holds that recourse to the death penalty may be justified only under the most narrow circumstances, namely, if it is the only possible way of effectively defending human lives against the unjust aggressor. The teaching reminds us that if non-lethal means are capable of protecting society, these are preferable as more in keeping with the concrete conditions of the common good and more in conformity with the dignity of the human person. So that's taken right from the Catechism. Okay? So from a Catholic point of view, the death penalty is wrong in very, very narrow circumstances. And I'll show you what the alternative is. Why we don't have to do this death penalty. Anybody hear the news today? Missouri killed another. They've had one a month over there. This was their 9th execution today. Their 9th in Missouri. Yeah.
For what?
Well, they're murderers, okay, grant you, but you know, it's ridiculous. It's like, is there no other way to deal with people who have a problem? And well, I won't get into that because I'm not an expert, but there will be a death penalty case coming in Indiana. There will be an execution date set for a man by the name of Michael Dean Overstreet, who is duly convicted of killing a Franklin College student back, I don't know, 12, 15 years ago. Does that mean something here to anybody? Anyway, Kelly,
I know, I just saw that on the news.
yeah. This man is violently mentally ill. He is extremely mentally ill. There is just, nobody could talk to him, see him, and know that he's not insane. He refuses to take meds, you know, so there's no controlling his insanity. And it's going to come, I'm sure this calendar year, they're going to want to execute him, you know, because he's lost the last of his years. So pray about that. It's just, do we really need to be in the business of killing our sick people in this country? That's a question to ask yourself. A couple of things I wanted to point out before I get into the slideshow is I have a couple of things that you're welcome to take. I have a bunch of these prayer cards. The prayer for the abolition of the death penalty written by Sister Helen Prejean. And so they're in a basket. Put it somewhere back here. You're welcome to take one. Also, we have a couple of copies of Scott Turo's book. He's a very famous author. But he wrote this book called Ultimate Punishment, a lawyer's reflections on dealing with the death penalty. Very, very interesting. I have several more of these at home if you're interested in those. One of the better websites that I have found really helpful to this whole idea is a website called Catholic Mobilizing Network. And if you are truly interested in a faith-based view of the death penalty, that's the place to go. There's a lot of good resources, and I just purchased this book from them, and it's called Where Justice and Mercy Meet. It's Catholic Opposition to the Death Penalty. it's a series of essays written from very, very different viewpoints of various people. But there's a lot of stuff out there that you can educate yourself on, because this is just going to keep rearing its ugly head. And I was just telling Allie that my personal feeling is that the opposition to the death penalty is going to have to come from faith-based groups. Because we've been going all over the state, the IAC, we've been to Fort Wayne, we've been to Hammond, we've been to Evansville, we've been all over the place showing this, and the best response we get is from faith-based organizations, churches, and so on. But I really think that anyone with a faith that there's renewal, that you can be forgiven of your sins, and that there's a possibility for not necessarily rehabilitation, but
Hey, who's that cute
that you
girl
can be
back here
forgiven of
working
your
in the kitchen?
sins, or be
Oh,
reconciled.
that's you.
Huh? Oh, okay.
I have a question.
Yes.
I mean, you're talking about like renewal of like from your sins, or whatever, right? Is that why like? I mean, in the Old Testament, there are like death penalties, executions, When the woman was going to get stoned by adultery and like Jesus stopped that from happening, I mean that was just they were stoning her, right?
Right.
Due to the old ways or something, right?
I'll look in my book, because it addresses that very question.
Does it?
Yeah, about the Old Testament views.
I'm just saying, like, why are those still like viable? Why are the Old Testament ways not still viable?
Well,
I mean,
because
what's that?
we're
It doesn't make any
enlightened.
sense to me.
Yeah, I think because we're enlightened.
Some people, I don't think they should exist any longer, because they are gonna do more. This person. I mean, we don't know that they will, but we know that they will.
But if they're in
You know
jail,
what I mean?
if they're in jail, then if they have life
If they're in jail,
without
we just keep them caged up. It's more like Jesus like a blessing in their life and in their suffering, because if we let them out, they're going to do more harm to everybody else. But if we keep them locked up, they're just going to keep existing in their own filthiness. So just extinguish that. Let them go and burn in hell, and then everybody can
That's
get
not
on.
my decision to make.
God, not ours.
No, God brought you to life.
That's what the point is. Okay, all right. I'm sorry.
Okay, that's
No, that's great.
Again, I'm not an expert, but
I know what it's like. That's not our decision to make. Okay, that's your point.
there was a young woman just recently in Evansville who was part of our group, who put together a thing called The Use of the Death Penalty and the Catholic Position on the Death Penalty. And she quotes exactly what I just read to you from the Catechism. And then she also has from the UCCB, the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops. In 2005, they said, when the state, in our names, with our taxes, ends a human life despite having non-lethal alternatives, it suggests that society can overcome violence with violence. The use of the death penalty ought to be abandoned, not only for what it does to those who are executed, but for what it does to all of society. What does it say about us? That we are one of 4 nations in this world who execute our citizens. China, North Korea, Saudi Arabia, and the U.S. We're a terrible company. We're a terrible company. Everybody else, first world nations, everybody is eliminated the death penalty. Except for us. Let's see, there's something else I'm going to share with you. Change is coming. I really feel that change is coming, despite the fact that Missouri and Texas keep killing their citizens. And what Indiana Abolition Coalition hopes to achieve is abolition of the death penalty before it is mandated by the Supreme Court. And I really think that eventually, 18 states now, and 2 more states have moratoriums on executions. So we're getting close to the halfway point. But we would like Indiana to be on the road to abolition before it's mandated as national. And once I do the slideshow, then I'll get into what you can do. Oh, yeah. We put this together. Paula Sykes is a member of our board, and she is the board head of the Indiana Defenders Council. So she's a very smart lawyer, and she put this together using facts and figures that she had available to her. So I'm not. Death penalty, do it for very good reasons. Most people who support the death penalty say, well, it costs less to keep a murderer locked up for the rest of his life. It helps prosecutors secure a life without parole plea, saving the cost of trial. It deters crime and helps keeps us safe. It's necessary to protect police. It's necessary to protect prison staff. It's a just and fair penalty for the worst of the worst killers. And it's the only way to stop killers from getting back out on the streets. And it gives victims' families closure. Sounds very reasonable, but this death penalty is a myth. Myth number one, it costs less than locking a killer up for life. The reality is, trial and appeal costs more. The reality is, trial and appeal costs for a death penalty, trial and appeal costs for the death penalty cost 10 times as much as life without parole. Even when you add in the cost of locking up someone for the rest of his life, life without parole costs much, much less than the death penalty. The cost figures come from a study by the nonpartisan group Indiana Legislative Services Agency. Here's the reality. Life without parole, it costs $42,000 for the trial and appeal, and incarceration for the rest of his life. This is based on a 75-year lifespan, $108,000, compared to the death penalty. And so you're going to come up with a good question here, right? Why does it cost so much? Any guesses? The death penalty process is more complicated because the life is on the line. The legislature has identified 16 aggravating factors that make a murder defendant eligible for the death penalty. Can anybody guess what any of those aggravating factors might be? You kill a police officer? Most likely. Well, yeah, could be. Yeah, if it's committed in conjunction with another felony. But if you kill a police officer, it's a done deal. So, also, the county prosecutor decides whether to file a death penalty request. You recall just recently the murders in southern Bartholomew County, where the fellow allegedly shot 4 people with a drug deal gone bad. It was about a year and a half ago in Waynesville. Anyway, there's no doubt that they've got the right guy. He hasn't been to trial yet, but the family went to the local prosecutor, to John Nash, and said, he's old enough that we really don't want to see him die by lethal injection, because he's going to die in prison anyway. So please don't seek the death penalty. And John Nash, much to his credit, said, I'm not going to. Okay. If a prosecutor files a death penalty request, special rules apply to help ensure competent defense representation. Two attorneys with limited caseloads and adequate compensation and resources. So what we're talking about here is money, right? Lots of money. If the defendant is convicted, there will be a second jury trial focused solely on what the appropriate sentence should be. So the trial takes so long and so much money. There's a longer, more complicated jury selection process called death qualification, in order to ensure that each juror can consider imposing a death sentence as well as other potential sentences. When I learned this, this really bugged me. If I get called for a jury trial for a murder suspect, I have to tell the attorneys who are interviewing me whether or not I can come back with a death penalty verdict. If I say no, it's against my conscience, I could not say, execute this person, they're kicking me off. They will kick me off the jury without any question. You have to be death qualified. So doesn't that sound like you're skewing the jury though? The jury then has all these people who would consider a death penalty. Right? That's the law right now. So, let's see. In March of 2012, attorneys in the Kevin Eisen case in Lake County questioned 270 potential jurors over 15 days without finding 12 who could fairly consider all potential sentences. They had been called from 600 potential jurors called in for pre-screening. Okay, and they couldn't find 12. So the Lake County prosecutor, Bernard Carter, forged ahead and sought the death penalty against Eisen a second time. Judge Thomas Defendant called in more than 1,000 potential jurors for pre-screening, set aside a month just for jury selection and a month for the trial. Eisen was ultimately sentenced to death, and that was March of last year, March of 2013, but only after considerable time and expense. And who paid for that? The taxpayers, exactly. Technologically impaired. Okay. Lake County Commissioners dipped into the emergency fund to help pay for the Eisen case. In Grant County, they took $500,000 from the county's road and street fund to pay for the county case, but the case ended up with life without parole. And Park County increased its county income tax rate by 0.25% to pay for a death penalty case, which also resulted in life without parole. So can we make the death penalty cheaper? Well, the special protections are in place for a reason. There's a life on the line, and we want to make sure that the death penalty is imposed fairly, right? We don't convict innocent people. But even in Texas, which has fewer protections in place and has undoubtedly executed at least one innocent person, the death penalty costs 3 times as much as life without parole. So what are we paying for? Death penalty cases don't just have a high price tag, they have a very low probability of death. This chart shows you capital cases for the first decade in Indiana. 80% of them were life without parole or less, and only 20% of them resulted in a death sentence. So death sentences have a very low probability of being carried out, which is a good thing, right? We don't want them carried out. But let's get it off the books, so it's not even a possibility. I mean, it's sitting there on the books, and it will be used if we need it. For every Indiana death row prisoner executed after exhausting his appeals, 3 more have had their sentences lowered. So, taxpayers, you and me, often pay the increased cost of the death penalty plus the cost of lifetime incarceration. So they've gone through all that rigmarole associated with the death penalty case. Cost, money, time, how many, thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars and years and years and years, and then it's life without parole, which it should have been started. I'm a very fiscally conservative, and it just took me such a waste of money. It's just a true waste of money. So myth number 2, it helps prosecutors secure a life without parole plea agreements, saving the cost of a trial. Some people argue that the threat of the death penalty helps prosecutors secure this life without parole plea. But the reality is that the death penalty cases that result in life without parole pleas average more than $120,000 per case because the stakes are so much higher. You want to get it right. But it's nearly 3 times as much in a case that's simply filed as life without parole to start with. So it's a little like paying for heart surgery instead of going to get some diagnostic tests made. It's just a ridiculous waste. Myth number 3, it deters crime and keeps us safe. I thought I heard from you before. The threat of the death penalty will keep people from committing murder. Studies reporting to show the deterrent effect attempt to predict how many murders will be committed due to this threat. The reality is, murder is not a predictable behavior. Murder is often a crime of passion, and usually drugs and alcohol are involved, or a lot of times they are. Killers don't think about the risk-benefit before they murder somebody. It's a passion, it's a deep passion. And even if they did, as we've seen, the risk of being executed is very small. So it's not really a deterrent. Throughout the first decade of this century, there were 3,502 homicides in Indiana. 46 of those killings resulted in the death penalty case being filed, and only 10 of those 46 resulted in a death sentence. Even if a person thought about the risk of being sentenced to death before committing the crime, the possibility would be very small. The risk would be very small. And again, more than 3 times as many death sentences are reduced to something less than actually result in execution. Let's see. Here's. If the death penalty deters murder, then murder rates should be lower in the states with the death penalty, right? Makes sense. In fact, states with the death penalty consistently higher in murder rates. So we really want to reduce death penalty cases could pay for more police officers with better training, better crime fighting tools, and better protective gear. In a 2008 survey of 500 U.S. police chiefs, when the chiefs were asked what interfered with effective law enforcement, lack of law enforcement resources ranked first. Insufficient use of the death penalty ranked dead last. Myth number 4. It's necessary to protect police officers. Police chiefs don't believe it. They would rather have more officers, more training, better equipment, more bulletproof vests, and treatment for drug addicts than those of mental illness. And again, that's death penalty information. I can't say it any better than this guy. He's a former Detroit and New York City police commissioner. He says the death penalty is a distraction from the real issues surrounding public safety. Myth number 5. It's necessary to protect prison staff and other prisoners. States that have the death penalty actually have much higher prison murder rates than states without the death penalty. It's pretty clear it's not making prisons any safer. In fact, in Indiana, there were 4 men who were serving long prison sentences. They've actually killed another inmate just so they could die by lethal injection. It was an incentive for murder. Actual prison wardens know that the death penalty doesn't keep their facilities safe. And they would rather have the money that's spent on the death penalty to spend on things that actually work. The death penalty is just a drain on the resources. He presided over 8 executions. Prison safety depends on proper staffing.
Just ahead of me, just ahead.
Okay.
Just look at that.
Oh, okay. You might expect, probably, this myth number 6, that it's a just and fair sentence for only the worst of the worst killers. Right? As we saw earlier, the death penalty is only imposed in a very small number of cases. And so, you might expect a careful statewide process to identify those worst of the worst killers. But you were wrong. You would be wrong. Because the system is so arbitrary. It's called Indiana's Other Lottery. In November of 2004, reporters from 7 Indiana newspapers published the results of a year-long investigation into how the death penalty is administered in our state. And they found that the death penalty is imposed so arbitrarily, they call it Indiana's Other Lottery. Whether defendants face the death penalty is unpredictable, depending not only on circumstances of the crime, but on a host of other factors, including where it was committed. If you commit a crime, commit a murder in Lake County or Marion County, you're much more likely to get a death sentence. Because of the larger tax base, in Indianapolis, there's a huge tax base. Bartholomew County, the tax base is so much less, it's not as likely. Media coverage is huge. Media coverage makes a big difference. I mean, how many of you have seen media coverage on the recent police killings in Indianapolis, right? There's been a couple in the last couple of years. And if you turn on the Indianapolis news, that's all you hear. I mean, it's just intense. And, you know, it's a fact of life, but you know, it just seems like it's overdone. And the views of the prosecutor, the local prosecutor. Depends on what he wants to do. So the local prosecutor decides when the death penalty should be stopped. And, you know, you talk to one prosecutor in Decatur County, or the prosecutor in Bartholomew County, and the prosecutor in Jefferson County, or wherever, and they all have a different idea about when to pursue the death penalty. So it's very arbitrary. In addition to arbitrariness, the death penalty is imposed much more frequently for the murder of white victims than for non-white victims. Studies across the nation and Indiana have shown that the death penalty is imposed much more often for a person who is white than for a non-white person. Of the 20 men executed in Indiana since 1972, all but one were convicted of killing white victims. You might think this disparity arises because most homicide victims are white, but research shows otherwise. You might think that there's simply more white homicides, but in fact, the homicide rate is about even, you know, it's like 56. I went too far. 53% of all homicide victims in Indiana from 1980 to 2000 were white, and 47% non-white. But the breakdown is much less even in cases that result in death sentences, with white victims accounting for 84% and non-whites 16%. So there's definitely a disparity, and a racial disparity. And then wrongful convictions. Those sentenced to death may not even be guilty of murder. Since 1972, at least 140 people who were sentenced to death in this country were later found to be innocent. We had a speaker here about 3 years ago in November, Randy Steigel. He was convicted of murder in Illinois, in Paris, Illinois. And he came and spoke at St. Bartholomew. And he spent 16 years on death row in Illinois until he was found to be innocent by the, have you heard of the Innocence Project? They are the people who go to who look at these people who are on death row who have just been pushed into the death row situation, and they go and look at the facts of the case. Randy was convicted of murder with, came out in, oh gosh, after years and years of research, that it was tied with the mob in Chicago, and they had paid off the two witnesses, the two eyewitnesses that saw him at the scene of the crime, and it turns out that they were a couple of drunken bums, and they were just paid off by, you know, by the mafia because they wanted to get rid of this guy. So he spent 16 years on death row. I mean, he's a very, he was very instrumental in getting the state of Illinois to abolish the death penalty 2 years ago. He was a very strong proponent of abolition.
Speaking of that, how many states have since abolished the death penalty?
I'm sorry.
How many states have abolished the death penalty? Have you seen progress?
There are currently 18 states with no death penalty.
But like you said, Illinois had the death penalty
Right.
and then they abolished it. So are we seeing improvement as far as?
Oh yeah. In the last 6 years, there have been 6 states.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's definitely a push that's coming. Thank you for asking me.
Where have as far as the 18 states that have abolished the death penalty, where are they geographically? Are they East Coast, West Coast?
Most of the states without the death penalty kind of cluster. Wisconsin, Michigan, New Hampshire, they're kind of in the north central. But then there's New Mexico, and then there's Connecticut, and a state here and there. So, of course, the southern states, there's nobody. They're on the right page. But as I said, 6 in 6 years is great news. We'd sure like to be number 7 page. Yeah, 140 people. This is just, actually this hasn't been updated because there have been a couple more exonerees. It's really fascinating. If you go to our website, you can get all kinds of links to people who are witness to innocence, which is a group of exonerees who are on death row and are now out because of the work of the Innocence Project. And they do speaking tours, and they're really interesting stories. Our system is just too flawed to trust with a penalty like that. There are just too many factors going into it. And so, home stretch. Myth number 7, it's the only sure way to stop killers from getting off the street. But a sentence of life without parole would do it. The prisoner never comes before a parole board. He never is released from prison. Now, I appreciate what the fellow said. Life without parole stinks. It really does. Life without parole, I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. Because the fellow that I write to told me he's got this cell that's, 8 by 3 or whatever it is, and he's out 1 hour each day if they don't have a lockdown. If they have a lockdown, all the privileges get taken away. It's a hellish life. You just sit in a cell for 23 hours a day. But he'd go for life without parole in a minute because he doesn't want this hanging over his head. It's lifeless death sentence. And I know you've read things recently about the horrible deaths that occurred in Oklahoma and in fact Missouri when they executed the fellow today, they used a drug that the manufacturer in Europe said we don't want it being used for executions, but they said, oh, it's not being used for executions, it's being used for a preliminary thing, but they gave it to this fellow, a couple of hours before they took him to the execution chamber. So the drugs are a real issue. The places that are making the drugs are not selling them to states that have a death penalty. So they're having trouble getting the drugs that they need. So life without parole takes the person off the streets immediately. Myth number 8, it gives the victim's family closure. After a sentence of life without parole is imposed, the convicted murderer begins serving his sentence immediately. A 3-stage appellate review process begins, but the sentence is not postponed until appellate review is completed. With death penalty sentences, everything is postponed until the appellate reviews, and that takes years and years. And also, the media. very little attention to the appellate process in light of that parole. You know, it doesn't make the headlines the way the death penalty is. So after the death penalty is imposed, it's a three-stage process that begins. Again, it takes years and years to go through each one. And of course, the media go back to the family and say, how do you feel about this? And then drag it through again and again. It's a very long, very drawn-out process. You can wait for years and years and years for an execution of evidence, which in the case of my pen pal, he's been on death row for 16 years now. He's in the federal penitentiary. But, you know, he doesn't have a date of execution. He just did not have a date of execution. But, you know, the language in there in prison with this thing hanging over their heads, you know, I think life without parole would be a mercy. And then, of course, the defendant's family, the fellow who's been accused of murder, his family has to go through it again and again and again. Waiting for their loved one to be killed, perhaps, and maybe even watching the execution. And this fellow, who's a former warden who oversaw 89 executions in Texas, he said there are other victims, not just the victim who was executed, but the families of the victims. And if you ever get called to serve as a juror on a death penalty case, I can't imagine what kind of trauma that would be. Since some jurors have experienced PTSD, like symptoms after serving on a jury. You know, it's a life and death decision, literally.
On the death penalty jurors, all this is analysis as well.
It depends on the case, I believe. I don't think it has to be unanimous because a jury can come back without a death sentence, and the judge will review it. The judge can come back and say, "No, I disagree with the jury." Sentence to death.
No. A friend of my mom lives in Carolina. She's a doctor. So when they got executed, she had to come out and he was dead. And I'm there for the mom actually 3 months ago. She still goes to therapy.
Is that
She's not in recovery. Because usually her situation, no person's dying of cancer or just dying of heart accident. This was someone they killed. She has went to the drug. She had cancer. She still was there to the
she didn't have a choice about going or not?
the judge wanted her to do it.
So there's a victim. There's another victim. Another victim. This fellow who saved on oversaw 89 executions. It's a gruesome business. You're going to never get used to it. I hope you don't get used to it. I can imagine that some of the staff at the prisons return to drugs and alcohol just to deal with what it is they're seeking. So the reality of the death penalty, when you strip away everything else, repealing the death penalty just makes good sense. Life without parole is the best alternative we have. That's what I have to share. If you are interested in taking action for abolition, number one, I would ask you to pray. also write your congressman. Our website has a real nifty application on it. You can go to our website, and if you don't know who your congressman is, you can just click on the state, and it will give you all the information you need, the address, the name and address of who to write. Let's see. So write to your state legislators. Join us. I brought applications. If you want to become a member of Indiana Abolition Coalition, we would welcome you. We need to expand our base. We need funds to do that because we can't apply for grants and things unless they see that we're a viable group within the state. So I have applications there as well. Educate people in your parish. Educate people in your community. If they want to ask questions, don't give me a call. I'll be happy to talk to them. Points to consider: the sacredness of life. But to me, it's just wrong. It's just wrong. And so you can find us at indianaabolition.org, or you can find all kinds of links on our website, like the Death Penalty Information Center, National Association for the Abolition of Death Penalty. Do you have questions?
So if you were like on the jury for like the death penalty case, what are your choices as far as a verdict goes?
I think it really depends, varies case to case, but I think that, if it's a death penalty case, if it's a murder case, you would be vetted before, if you could not agree to impose a death penalty, you wouldn't be very well. So, yeah, I could say that this person is guilty and send it to.
I was just wondering if it's like innocent or death penalty, like there's not a whole lot.
No.
Okay? Yeah. Greatly depends on the crime and the process of it. Like a police officer, one guy gave him the work that was on one of the slides there. He was a police officer and he was sitting in his car and got hit and shot him. It was pretty cut and dry. The catechism talks about just and unjust war. A lot of people refer to World War II as having been just war because we were defending, the Allies were defending the other people, the Jews and others in Europe who were being killed, and so it was considered to be a just war. But there's always going to be conscientious objectors. People say, killing's wrong no matter what, no matter what form it is. So, that's a good question.
I remember reading about this and feels like if there was like a country that like didn't have the resources to lock up people and was still orchestrating people in prison, then it But like here in the US, is that something?
Supermax out in Colorado, Canadian Bay was. This guy who grew up in Oklahoma City in America, and he was actually executed at Terre Haute.
South when they did him from prison. And there are people like realizing that
What's up?
they were either there because they wanted to see the media expression of it or they were protesting. And I remember when we actually they announced that the news people died,
don't get rid of it, it'll stay on the books, and then it's gonna be easy.
And it's hard. Like, I'm a college material, so there's a rural penitentiary there. And there's a rural scouting. Basically, it gives Boy Scouting to children who are in low-income families the opportunity to do scouting in a positive role. At one of my school, my kid's dad is a death row inmate. And the reason why he lives in Florida is because mom, after his dad got tried and everything like that, mom moved there so that she could go see them for one month. Their last visit at the jail. And the other boys used to tease him about his dad being a military. And it's so heartbreaking because what do you tell the kid? It's okay. Like, it's just, I had to go to special training to deal with that situation. Yeah, you tell a 7-year-old what's going to happen. That's the situation. He doesn't understand why that's the situation.
Right. It's hard. Any comments?
Is there ever work with the audience?
I'm sorry?
No, I'm an actual
Oh, yes.
license in this one.
Yes. Yeah, one of our honorary board members from Fort Wayne is nominated as National Alliance for the Mentally Ill. And they're very much involved in keeping people like Michael D. Overstreet from being executed clearly. I don't see it. I just don't think we should. Oh yeah, we're having a picnic on Saturday at Norris Park. If you're interested in joining us, this is the state group, IAC. And we have 2 guest speakers who are going to be there. One is a new member of our group, Paige Bromsky, who's a murder victim family member. And she's going to talk about her feelings about doing away with the death penalty. And also a lady who's an education director at the women's prison. She is. So that should be really interesting. Something's going to be a little cool for a picnic. Better that.
There are flyers back there if you like one. It's just happy finding that it's a Saturday.
Yeah.
So pick one up if you want.
And I do have copies back there that mostly what is on here was taken from what we call our one-pagers. And so if you're just interested like in cost analysis stuff, there, you're welcome to help yourself to one of the one-pagers or one of each is fine. This slideshow is available on our website, and you're welcome to share it, show it, make copies of it. That's great. It's there to be used as an educational tool. Okay?
Thank you so much. Let's give her one more hand.
If anybody wants a scout to rub book, or I'll pass one around and take a look. I do have several copies of it.
If you're on my email list, I will try very hard to make a nice little email that has all this information in it, including the website and some links for you. I just have a couple little things. We have a lot coming up this month. I know we're almost halfway with our month, but September has been very busy, which has been great. Shroud Turn exhibit is in Edinburgh next week. St. Bartholomew is taking a little field trip. So if you're interested, take one of these and make email about it. Should be good. We'll go see the exhibit as a group and then we'll grab some dinner afterward in Edinburgh. So that's coming up on the 15th. So that's Monday. If you are interested, email me or call me or email Kathy Davis Shanks. I know you can RSVP. Our next Theology on Tap is the 24th. We have Judge Steve Hyman coming to speak on faith and politics. It's formally titled, Does Our Faith Allow Us to Judge Others? So we'll have kind of an extension of what Donna started today